Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe P. Zapia, and today we're going to take a look at the NFC draft grades for the 2024 NFL Draft. It's in the books. It's done. It seems like the perfect time to see who made the grade, and everyone's doing the draft grades and all that stuff. Yeah, the eye test does matter, especially when we're talking about fantasy stuff, but Thor, you put the math behind it. Tell everybody why the draft grades that you do are so different than everybody else.
I try to put metrics behind it. I try to quantify the value, at least of where my board saw these prospects in advance of the draft. So it's not just eyeballing it. It's not just, capricious after the draft. I try to put metrics behind that of where my board saw the guy and then compare that against the draft equity that the team spent. And then, that's how we do the division after the draft of each of the classes and put an ROI metric on it.
Speaking of capricious, Derek Brown joins us here on the show, and he's going to be giving us his take in the grades from the fantasy perspective, which is exactly what we all care about at the end of the day. So make sure if you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, ring the bell till it goes ding. And of course, after the show, drop your comments below. Let us know what you thought of certain teams in the NFC and how they did. Let's get to the NFC teams here, and let's start with the Arizona Cardinals. I thought they had a really good start to the draft here, Thor. What'd you make of the Arizona Cardinals when the dust settled?
I agree with you. Of course, it was chalk going Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, but as we saw with some decision makers over the weekend, chalk wasn't always the easiest decision or the easiest card to turn in. Some of those guys did not do that. So even turning that in, you got to give them kudos. Arizona is very much going to enjoy that guy. You don't like to toss out the word prodigy easily. It applies here, obviously, with the Hall of Fame father in the physical dimensions that he brings in. And he was a 100th percentile PFF grade against single man coverage past couple years. And then he saw more double coverage than anyone that Matt Harmon had ever charted at reception perception, while shattering the record for success rate that Matt Harmon had ever charted against double coverage. So I don't know how you defend the guy. I guess the NFL defensive coordinators, that is now their problem. So that was a smash pick at number 4, like the Darius Robinson pick at number 27. That guy specifically, he's like the thing that he lacks, it's athleticism, but he's the monster at 6'5", 285, specifically a fit for 3-4 fronts. It's exactly what Arizona runs. I also like the Trey Benson pick at 66. That was exactly the slot where he was on my board, RB1. I think that James Conner might be in trouble. Trey Benson, do not look in your rear view mirror, James Conner. Trey Benson is coming for you. The rest of the picks after that was what I had the issue with Arizona. I thought they started going off the grid real quick. I didn't understand the Isaiah Adams pick. I especially did not understand the Tip Reiman pick. I was like, what are you doing there? So that, some of those picks is why I started to get confused. I ended up giving them a C because of their success early on. And they absolutely improved their talent, but because of some of those weird decisions late, I ended up giving them a C.
D-Bro, from a fantasy perspective, it's hard not to get excited because you got the alpha dog wide receiver in Harrison and Benson, who could be a really good running back value. So what'd you give the Arizona Cardinals draft here?
I give him a B-, only because I really love their first 3 picks. I agree with Thor that after that, it just went off the rails. Trey Benson's going to be their do-it-all workhorse running back as soon as next season. James Conner's probably going to split work with him this year, so it's going to bump Conner down the board. The question is where. I'll be updating my redraft rankings later this week on FantasyPros.com. The Tip Reiman pick didn't make any sense to me. I don't get it. If you wanted the inline blocking guy to help out your offensive line, help out the quarterback, why didn't you go with A.J. Barner around later? So, yeah, I give them a B- only because of their first 3 picks, but the rest of it, I have no clue what they were doing.
Yeah, very hot and cold there, and it looked like it was going to be so good when they started, but alas, it's a long game, the draft. You got to be ready for all of the pieces. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons. Oh, boy, this is going to be a good time. So, Thor, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. They didn't do what we thought that they were going to do, or what anybody thought they were going to do, but they were looking more to the future than the present with this first pick of Michael Penix. Again, we'll see. Time will tell if they were right or wrong. The rest of this draft, though, what did you make of it as a whole? What did you grade it?
Yeah, they definitely got an F, and they guaranteed themselves that right away with that first pick, which is, Joe, as you said, and you were correct, it's the first selection where I've ever been. I didn't know what to say. I was literally speechless. my brain that was discombobulated. The thing is, there are picks where you see worse picks all the time. In fact, one of them came 3 selections later at the same position in Bo Nix. Certainly a far more egregious reach in terms of qualitatively. So you see worse picks all the time in the draft. It's the decision-making paradigm that was so stunning about that, where you could justify the Penix pick there if you wanted, if you loved him. And you could certainly, months before that, you could justify the money that you gave to Kirk Cousins. The thing that you couldn't do was both those things in conjunction with one another. That is a waste of one resource or the other that I believe nullifies your opportunity to potentially compete to go far in the playoffs or compete for a Super Bowl these next couple of years, which in my opinion is the only reason, not to use a Herm Edwards, but the only reason that you play this game. The rest of what they did, I mean, the big O, Rook, our boy, the Clemson defensive tackle in round 2, didn't have a problem with that, didn't have a problem with Braylon Trice. The rest of what they did on day 3, I was a little bit lower on that, but the Penix pick in conjunction with the Cousins signing, you get an F from me.
All right, D-Bro, let's grade the Falcons from your perspective here.
F minus, 0, zero sum. I mean,
But what if Kirk Cousins ends up, getting hurt and Penix steps in and plays well? They'll look like geniuses.
No, then they look like idiots for signing him to the giant contract then, because they should have never done that considering the
But
injury.
in theory, that makes sense. You got a more accomplished quarterback, and Cousins certainly is that.
You don't even get a chance to take advantage of the rookie contract stuff with Atlanta now, because you're burning every single year of it unless you pick up the 5th-year option. So he's got good money on his contract for the next 3 years. So Kirk's not going anywhere. Michael Penix, you can count me. I'm avoiding him in all Dynasty rookie drafts. I have him as my 28th overall player in Superflex formats, because the fact about it is you're going to be able to get him cheaper in a year or 2 or maybe 3 from now. Remember how cheap Jordan Love was in all of these Dynasty formats? It's going to be the same thing for Michael Penix. So don't spend the 2nd-round pick and all this draft capital. We got to pick top 10. Oh, great. He just got his name called really early to sit on the bench for 3 years. Congrats. I hate it for Michael Penix, and I hate it for Falcons fans. You blame Terry Fontenot. Don't blame me.
All right. Who do we blame for the Carolina Panthers, Thor? This is a team that seems to struggle every draft, no matter what, in terms of evaluation. So did they struggle bus again for you this year?
Yeah, it's crazy. We were talking about this on the AFC show, but Brandon Beane and the Bills, they were given free draft equity to take the receiver that they were going to take anyway. That came courtesy from Disco Dan Morgan, who he gave up the number 141 pick for the 200th pick for the right to take to pay Xavier Legette more money. I mean, that's all it was. They moved from the 33rd slot to the 32nd slot, and the Bills weren't. I mean, the Bills got who they were going to take anyway at the same position, Keon Coleman. They weren't going to take him, and then the Bills got to pay him less. And then they asked Dan Morgan at the presser, like, "Why did you do that?" And he's like, "Oh, the 5th-year option." It's like, hey, Dan, the better department, the better scouting department for years, a guy at the same position, they didn't want the guy that you wanted, so maybe that should have concerned you. But the other thing is, they had gauged by the very definition of their willingness to accept that trade with you, that the 5th-year option that they were getting or whatever, it is less valuable than the 4 years that they were getting of the guy that you are handing them at the that slot of the 141st pick or whatever. The value of that is more than, like, what are you doing? But the crazy thing was the torching of that draft equity. He didn't have any shot to finish first in the division of GMs that torched the most draft equity, because, of course, Terry Fontenot in the top 10 had taken that award a long time ago. The Carolina Panthers, they get a D for this draft. Xavier Legette, Dan Morgan's transgressions aside, that has nothing to do with Xavier Legette's game. I don't mind Xavier Legette at all. I ranked him 48th. I do think it's a slight reach. There's obviously the local angle there. But he's fine. I comped him to David Boston. He has a fun game, late breakout guy, special teamer as well, so they can plug him into that early on. Well, to see with him, I thought it was a bigger reach with Jonathon Brooks in the 2nd round. They obviously liked him more than me. Jatavian Sanders, I was lower on Jatavian Sanders than just about anyone. Like, take a look at boards around the industry. The hilarious thing is that was the one pick that Carolina made that my board said was not a reach turned out the NFL was just as low on Ja'Tavion Sanders as I was. I was pretty low on this Carolina class, gave it a D, but it was not the worst class in this division. So that's the one nice thing that I can say about it.
D-Bro, can you say anything nice about the Panthers?
I gave him a C minus. I think better things are here for fantasy. The draft equity, and with Xavier Legette, you could talk about it like, the late breakout and stuff. The guy that I really want to hammer here is Jonathon Brooks. I think this is going to be Dave Canellis' workhorse back. I mean, we saw what he did with Rachaad White last year, 7th in opportunity share. Year before that, when he was a QB coach in Seattle, he was standing on the sidelines and saw Kenneth Walker ranked 13th in opportunity share. So as soon as Brooks is ready, he will be the workhorse bell cow of this offense. Miles Sanders can be cut after this year for only $2.9 million in dead cap hit. Chuba Hubbard is out the door as unrestricted free agent. They can help ease Brooks in the early going, but this cements Jonathon Brooks as a first-round dynasty rookie draft pick. Ja'Tavion Sanders, I'll just echo with Thor. Clear path to playing time, but as far as his talent, I'm a little bit lower on him. Have him as the tight end 4 in rookie ranks, 33rd overall player in rookie drafts right now.
All right. Well, it's been a tough start here for these two professors. The grades have been very, very stern. Maybe things will get better here for the Chicago Bears. They took Caleb Williams. They took Rome Odunze. I mean, it's got to be off to a good start here. Thor, no?
Yeah, I give them a B+, although I saw a couple of Bears fans on Twitter. They think that that's too harsh. I will say the Bears, they come out of this draft with what my numbers say, second most talent in the aggregate. They did spend the most draft equity to get there, though, so just keep that in mind. That nicked their ROI a little bit. Caleb Williams, of course, the most talented player in the class, but obviously the number one pick. So I did like the Rome Odunze selection with where they took him. That there was a thought that maybe they would defer to defensive needs or maybe offensive line there. I like what they did. Now you have the 3 amazing receivers that you put around Caleb Williams. We know Caleb Williams' game and what he likes to do. He likes to extend. He likes to allow the receivers to break off their routes and start to go downfield. Rome Odunze is absolutely incredible, climbing the ladder and then making these incredible catches over guys. And then he is incredibly deceptive as well at both creating space as the ball is descending, but also like in positioning in those moments, but also keeping the defender off the ball and the path and the deception at that point with the late hands and different subterfuge mechanisms that he has, like while the ball is descending as well. His ball skills are incredible. And then the hands as well. He just literally doesn't drop anything that he gets his hands on. I comped him to Devontae Adams, so we're going to get another one of those in heading back to that division. The Bears only had 3 picks after that. I like them. More or less. Amagaji was around where his value should have been. Tory Taylor, people that follow me on Twitter know that I'm an Iowa fan, and I was Tory Taylor's biggest fanboy. He's a punter, and I know that some people that maybe didn't follow college football as close, they're like, oh, they take a punter in the 4th round. Tory Taylor is amazing. The balls that he punts inside the 10, he has this ability to just stick, and then they don't go into the end zone. NFL fans, you'll see what I'm saying once he starts punting. But that was a fun one. Only 5 picks for the Bears, but I thought they did a good job, and obviously bring in just about as much talent in the aggregate as anybody. Give them a B+.
D-Bro, your thoughts on what the Bears did from a fantasy perspective? What's the grade?
I'll give him a B. We know Caleb is Caleb. I don't need to tell anybody about that. Rome Odunze, a lot of people are talking. They're worried about he's going to be this year's JSN. I understand that. Keenan Allen is an unrestricted free agent after this season, so I will be drafting Rome where I was going to draft before because I think that not only does talent equals opportunity, Rome has it. I'm not worried about him. I give the Chicago Bears a B here.
All right, let's move on to the Dallas Cowboys. Some varying opinions here. So, Thor, I'm interested to get yours. They started with the tackle, then went to the edge. They didn't take the running back. Everybody was waiting, especially when Marshawn Lloyd just kind of fell in their lap, and they still said, no thanks. How old is Ezekiel Elliott? Let's go sign him instead. So, Thor, what'd you make of the Dallas Cowboy draft?
Yeah, so I gave him a B plus overall. The first pick that they took was Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma, who has come up twice previously when we were talking about other team selections in the AFC episode, right? With the Ravens and the Chiefs, because they both had Guyton on other sides of it. Guyton became interesting at the very end of the first round because he was that last sort of consensus first round offensive tackle, and there was those several contending teams that needed the offensive tackle because of the environment they were in. There was some of the competition for Guyton there. The Cowboys were the team that ended up winning his services, and they did so in a very interesting way, in a clever way. I liked what they did there. They were at 24, and they basically won a gamble. They traded down from 24 to 29, picked up a third round pick. They didn't only fortify their offensive line by winning the gamble that Guyton would still be available at 29 and popping them there, despite all the sharks in the water for that last offensive tackle. So they get Guyton at 29. He falls down to there. Then with the third round pick that they acquired in that trade, they stopped Cooper Beebe's fall, the stud offensive guard from Kansas State, at 73. Cooper Beebe was the 52nd player on my board. The only reason Cooper Beebe fell down to there, he was this monster in the Big 12, who was a 92nd percentile athlete. The only reason he fell down there was he had short, stubby arms. He had the second shortest arms of like 120 guards in my database for this class. If he can overcome that, just like he did in college, he is going to be a tremendous offensive guard in the NFL as well. The rest of their stuff, I like their second round pick as well of Marshawn Kneeland, who was a stud defensive end in the MAC, who dominated down there and tested as a 90th percentile athlete. The questions with him, you dominated in the MAC, and the MAC has become a pretty poor conference. The guys he was dominating are not going to be playing football in the future. So that was one question with him. Then he also has to refine the pass rushing moves because he has his hair on fire, come forward, he's just throwing the kitchen sink and stuff like that. It's just this extremely aggressive game. Needs some more nuance, needs some more pass rushing moves with him. But overall, I liked what Dallas did, gave him a B+.
D-Bro, your thoughts on the Cowboys draft?
I don't understand what they were doing with running backs. Y'all hit that. Right now it's Rico Dowdle or Zeke Elliott. They're going to be the starters. I think considering what they did, loved all the offensive line picks. It's going to help this team out. CeeDee Lamb should eat considering this receiving room. I gave them, based off the offensive line and the fortification there, I gave them a B+.
Okay, so a B+ there again. I don't think any of us really understand what's going on there with the running backs. Let's get to the Lions here. Thor, you had some good things to say about the Lions draft. They had a good draft last year, got a lot of good quality talent in that one. How'd they come out in 2024 for you?
Yeah, Lions fans were, and the administration there were upset. Some people at my job criticized some of the decisions, with the picking non-premium positions in the first round last year. And Brad Holmes, he was upset with some people that have jobs like I have, criticizing past drafts even before that. So Brad Holmes, I hope you're listening. I give this class an A+. I love what he did this year. I mentioned the trade just a second ago when Dallas moved back, which I love that move for Dallas. The team on the other side of that, it was Mr. Brad Holmes, the guy that moved up. This was a win-win trade. The manifestation of all the offensive tackles going higher up above was that it was shoving defenders down the board that we thought were going to go higher. One of those guys was Terrion Arnold, who was the number 2 corner on my board. I ranked him 16th. He was available at 24. Brad Holmes got aggressive, moved up in that trade. Juice well worth the squeeze from the Lions' perspective. Why? Because cornerback was their biggest need. They had spent the offseason trying to address it with the trade for Carlton Davis, the contract for Amik Robertson, but they weren't done. They make the move for Arnold. That was tremendous. Then the next round, Enos Rakestraw Jr., he had gotten filtered down the board. He was number 36 on my board. They ended up getting him at 61. I comp him to Byron Murphy Jr., a guy who was a very good collegiate guy on the outside, played some slot as well. Obviously, he has turned into a slot at the NFL level. That's where I think Enos Rakestraw Jr. is going, and I think he is going to fit really well there. Little on the skinny side and not the best athlete, but I love the way he plays the game, and I think it's going to be a big-time fit there. Holmes did a very interesting upside lottery ticket shot on a kid from British Columbia in the middle rounds. Just a total ball of clay type of guy there. But the picks at the end, I love the value on all of them. Sione Vaki, Makai Wingo, and then Christian Mahogany were all just super duper fun picks at very good values. And Christian Mahogany in particular was, I just thought was an abject steal. A guy who was number 70 on my board. They got him at 210. I do not know why Christian Mahogany fell down that far. I need someone to explain this to me. I love what Brad Holmes said about him in the post-draft presser. So this is Brad Holmes, quote, on Christian Mahogany: he's got some dirtbag in him. He's one of these Jersey kids who doesn't take a lot of crap. I had to tell you that one, Joe.
I'm glad that you did. I think we're all better off for that one. Last year was the exciting draft from fantasy perspective for the Lions, but Debro, looking at what they did this year in terms of fortification, what do you grade it?
I mean, really, they helped out the trenches. They helped out the defense. I think it's going to put them in more positive game scripts. That's going to help Dave Montgomery. I agree with everything Thor said. I give him an A.
All right, another A. Wow, A's for the Lions. Look at this. What a time to be alive. The Green Bay Packers. They had a lot of needs in the secondary, Thor. They did address them, but they did go to the offensive line first with Jordan Morgan. What'd you think what the Packers did here?
I'm generally higher on what the Packers do. I gave them a C- this year. I feel like they thought that they had to grab Morgan because that offensive line environment, what we were seeing on Thursday. I was fine with that. But yeah, and I was fine with what they done too, as far as Edger and Cooper and my linebacker too. But it was after that I got a little bit confused. I thought they reached on Javon Bullard. I like MarShawn Lloyd, not quite as much as Debro does, but just with the running back room, the way that it was, I thought they had other needs. I didn't really get that. And then day 3 in particular, I didn't really understand what they were doing. And then they didn't hit the defensive back positional need, even though those guys were getting filtered down the board. So I was a little bit confused. I gave them a C-.
All right, Debro, what'd you give the Packers here?
I mean, pretty much Thor and I are lockstep here. I gave him a C+. The guy I'll bring up here is Marshawn Lloyd. He was the RB4 off the board. I don't agree with that. Daniel Jeremiah didn't agree with that. Marshawn Lloyd doesn't agree with that. Jim Nagy doesn't agree with that. He was the RB1 of this class. I still have him as my RB2 of this class. I think you should be taking him in the second round of Dynasty rookie drafts. I'm not that worried about Josh Jacobs. And for everybody at home, this is where Josh Jacobs finished last year amongst 49th qualifying running backs. 41st in explosive run rate, 37th in missed tackles, 44th in yards after contact per attempt. None of those numbers are good. I'm worried about Jacobs this year. Again, that leads me to believe that Marshawn Lloyd is going to get fed, or at least be a very prominent part of this backfield. And if Josh Jacobs can't bounce back, the Green Bay Packers can cut him. They would eat a $9.3 million dead cap hit next year. But when you have the 14th most cap space in the NFL next year, maybe they can afford to do that.
And so you gave them just a flat C, or you gave them the minus or the plus?
I'll give them the C+. I'll be a little bit
C+. That's very kind of you. You're such a good person. All right, let's go to the next one here, and we'll bring up the Los Angeles Rams, a team that we're not used to having first-round picks. Well, they took Jared Verse in the first. Fiske, a great athlete, a defensive tackle, which is something they needed to replace with Aaron Donald gone. So the Los Angeles Rams, Thor, how did they grade out?
Yeah, they went from, them picks to being very, to all of a sudden they had draft equity and they started doing infrastructure stuff, and taking their medicine and doing board value stuff. I liked it. Taking their vitamins. I gave them a B. Just a rock solid effort here. Jared Verse, my edge too. I comped him to Kayvon Thibodeau. I think there's a lot of similarities in their game, certainly in their frames, their testing, and then just the ethos of the north-south speed to power thing. That took his collegiate teammate Fiske in the second round, like you mentioned. The thing I need to say about Fiske for people out there, he is not the Aaron Donald replacement or the guy that he doesn't play like Donald. You can push him over and he's not like the run game guy, but he's the passing down guy. He's going to get after the quarterback. That's what he does. And then the athletic testing with him. You might have to do someone else on the rundowns. But yeah, that's what you're getting with him. Blake Corum is interesting that they grabbed him in the third round. And for Blake Corum as well, now you get to stay in the same area code as Jim Harbaugh. So that's pretty cool. With Corum, I think he's the early down guy. That's where he steals from Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams, of course, is going to stay on the field in third down. So, Blake Corum didn't really do any passing down stuff at Michigan. So I think that's how that thing shakes out. After that, it was just interesting stuff. I didn't have any problems with any of their stuff on day 3. Interesting depth guys. The pick I really liked there was Bo Limmer late from Arkansas. Both center and guard eligibility, and a really good athlete in a big frame who was both a good starter at guard and center in the SEC for years. I didn't really understand why he fell to 217. I had him 98th on my board. A B for the Rams.
All right. Blake Corum, kind of the one big offensive piece here, but looking at the big picture, would you give the Rams, D-Bro?
I gave him an A. I thought they smashed the draft. I
Okay.
thought they dramatically improved their defense in multiple different spots. Corum, the thing I'll bring up here is the Rams were only 14th in positive script plays last year. I think if their defense improves, that goes up, and that's going to give some volume to Blake Corum. Now, I still think Kyren Williams is going to be the leader of this backfield, 60 to 65% of the opportunities at least. That's probably going to hover him around the RB1 conversation. If people are worried about Blake Corum and he falls in drafts, I'm going to scoop him up.
All right, don't forget, everybody, the Dynasty Draft Kit is up and running right now. The 2024 version is live at fantasypros.com/dynasties. So as you're hearing all this content about these players, again, you could use the mock draft simulator, and you could also go over there and check out the Dynasty Draft Kit. Again, use it, get all the access to the expert rankings, the rookie draft advice, the mock drafts. Everything's in there for you to be successful in your Dynasty draft. So go check it out right now at fantasypros.com/dynasty. The Minnesota Vikings, Thor. You were a kid at Christmas. You got your quarterback. You didn't have to give up more to get him to. I mean, everything kind of came up Minnesota for you on the night of the draft. So when you start to look at the rest of the picks and grade it all out, be honest now. I don't want the Thor Nystrom, heart grade here. I want the Thor Nystrom algorithm grade.
Yeah, it's an A. I don't think it could have gotten much better for the Vikings. You look around at the mock drafts in the 2 months heading up to this draft, every single time for the Vikings to get up to get a quarterback, be that May, be that McCarthy, you always had to give up at least the second first-round pick. The 23rd one was the original slot, if not the 2025 round one pick. Somehow the Vikings managed to get J.J. McCarthy at number 10, which the way that happened was basically Kwesi called the bluff of, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, their general manager, called the bluff of the Giants at number 6. They weren't going to take the quarterback, and then he benefited from some luck as well. I don't know if he called that Fontenot was gonna go off the grid and some different stuff like that. But yeah, he ends up not having that. What he ends up trading was just middle round picks to the Jets in order to move up the one slot, and ends up taking J.J. McCarthy there. The upshot of that, not only do you keep your first round pick next year, which could end up being high because of the roster, you keep the second first round pick. Well, then because of those circumstances we talked about before with the 14 offensive players going off the board straight at the top, the defenders were falling down the board. Dallas Turner, who spent the entire draft process as the odds-on favorite against the entire field to be the first defender off the board, he falls down to 17. Kwesi gets aggressive with the 23rd pick, uses that, parlays it up to the 17th pick. They take Dallas Turner there. And then they didn't have any day 2 picks, but then on day 3, Khyree Jackson, the Oregon cornerback, they take him. Great fit for Brian Flores' scheme because he's super duper big. Dan Lanning, the Oregon coach, loves him. The rest of the day, they just sort of did. We're taking different developmental shots, but overall, very good ROI on their slots. Number 1, the first point that I would make, but number 2, the 3-dimensional chess thing of reading the room, number 1, and then knowing the environment that you were in, to not have to give up the extra equity, keep your potential monster asset of the round 1 pick next year, and then come out with both McCarthy and Dallas Turner in so doing was a masterful job. I thought the Vikings get an A this year.
All right, D-Bro, what'd you give the Vikings?
Well, Thor's going to be happy with this. I gave him an A. I mean, look, everything that Thor laid out. I mean, to get your quarterback, I mean, especially where they did, and we've talked about J.J. McCarthy. He's been the QB2 off my board the entire part of this process. I love him as a player. And you add Dallas Turner, all the other parts and pieces, and again, upgrading the other side of the ball in the defense, man. I mean, looking from just a fantasy perspective on J.J. McCarthy, I'm sky high on him. I mean, if you look at what Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins did last year in their 8 combined starts where they played at least 70% of the snaps, they finished as a QB 11 or higher in 63% of their games. That would have been the 6th highest mark in fantasy, right above Justin Herbert. So you're telling me J.J. McCarthy gets airdropped into this system? Justin Jefferson, T.J. Hawkinson, Jordan Addison. And I know T.J. Hawkinson, it's up in the air when we're going to see him.
Sure.
But I'm trading into rookie drafts to get J.J. McCarthy in Superflex. I just took him in a draft today, boys, where he fell to the 110. You're giving me that? You're giving me J.J. McCarthy at that spot? And all day. A+ for the Minnesota Vikings.
The New Orleans Saints started with the offensive tackle Fuaga. They got Kool-Aid a little bit after that in the 2nd round. Then Spencer Rattler. So they didn't have a pick for a while there until the 5th. Thor, what'd you make of the Saints draft?
Well, I'm giving him a B minus, but D-Bro just said some very kind things about my franchise. So I'd like to give another grade for the Saints, which is to grade Mickey Loomis against his divisional contemporaries, Disco Dan Morgan and Terry Fontenot. He gets an A compared to what those jokers
That's a
were
low
doing.
bar, Thor.
Yeah, it's a very, very low bar. I like what Loomis did early, taking Talisi Fuaga, the guy that we were tossing Talisi Fuaga in that 14 slot to the Saints throughout the spring in our mock draft exercises. And Loomis just does the sensible, logical thing, which again, in this division was crazy, compared to what those other guys were doing. Then at 41, he stops the fall of Kool-Aid McKinstry. Again, another sensible, logical, value-laden thing. Later on, taking Spencer Rattler. I love that. You might find something there. Spencer Rattler, people forget, after his redshirt freshman year, he was considered a potential future number 1 overall pick. They were evoking him to like a pint-sized Patrick Mahomes after that season that he played for Lincoln Riley. Then his last 2 seasons, he was stuck behind the worst pass-blocking offensive line that I have ever seen at the Power 5 level, playing in the SEC. He was dead to rights all the time, which his game could not sustain behind. It was particularly bad fit for the type of player that Spencer Rattler is, liking to scramble around a little bit like a Bryce Young or a Caleb Williams, a little bit, extend the play, whatnot. You cannot do that behind an offensive line where there is immediate pressure every single play. So for the Saints to take for fantasy parlance, this is a post-hype sleeper shot by the Saints at dart throw at the cheapest price point you possibly could. I absolutely love that. And then some of their later shots as well. Bub Means, guy is 6'1", 212, 93rd percentile athlete that was playing a different position a couple years ago. Why not take the dart throw at 170th? I liked a lot of what Loomis was doing here.
D-Bro, I know sometimes you're tough on your New Orleans Saints and your expectations were low. So were the expectations low enough where the grade on the curve is actually better than I might expect?
No, I'm burying them on this one. Thor said a lot of very great things. I'm giving them a D. I'm not in on this.
That's huge. The biggest variance we've had between you two.
Here's my deal with the Saints. I'm on board with the Fuaga pick. But after that, what are you doing, Mickey Loomis? Like, what? You're in the second round. Your offensive line is in shambles. Why didn't you just watch what the Pittsburgh Steelers were doing? Why didn't you watch what the Las Vegas Raiders are doing? This offense will not operate well. Your running back doesn't have run to move if you can't freaking block. Your quarterback, who was banged up all last year, is not having time in the pocket if you can't block. Both guard positions, questionable. Trevor Penning, fine. You want to give him a pass? That's great. But what has he shown you that he can actually play in the NFL? I'm burying them for this because I do not understand why they went Kool-Aid McKinstry when you already have a solid, if not really darn good secondary in Marshawn Lattimore, Alontae Taylor, and Paulson Adebo. I get Adebo is a free agent after this year. You deal with that next year. You need offensive line and you need blocking right now. So no, maybe I'm just a homer on this one. I'm burying the Saints. I hated this draft.
All right. This is a good therapy session for you. Just let it out. Let it out, Derek. New York Giants. I'm not sure what the Giants' plan is, but it was smart to take Malik Nabers because goodness knows they needed a wide receiver. After that, Thor, I'd love to get your take on the Giants draft because it seems like it's just sort of mid.
Yeah, fair to say. I ended up giving him a C+. I love the Nabers pack. That receiving core was tough to look at before that, and Nabers at least makes it look legitimate. Nabers is going to be perennial Pro Bowler, if not perennial All Pro. He is different. The way that guy moves is different. Then the receiving, you bump everyone else down, and now it starts to look like a real NFL receiving core. Tyler Nubin was the first safety on my board, so I at least see what they're doing there. He doesn't look like a ton in terms of the athleticism and stuff. The thing I'll give him, he has the same thing that Antoine Winfield does, the guy that came before him in that Gopher safety room, in that he sees things before they happen. So he gets a head start on every single play, which, if you get a head start on a race that is only, 10, 15 yards, every single time you get a step head start, you tend to win a lot of races there. So that's the thing that you see with Tyler Nubin. Theo Johnson, I thought was a horrible pick. I think he's fool's gold. I compare him to Albert O from a couple of years ago from Missouri. I did like Tyrone Tracy, though. I think that kid's a sleeper. He might start stealing some carries from Devin Motor Singletary, but give Giants C+ overall.
All right, D-Bro, the Nabers pick is an A, but collectively, when you look at the Giants draft, what is it?
I'm going to give them a B. I'm with Thor on the Theo Johnson pick. I'm not a fan of his game. He hasn't finished higher than 29th in yards per route run or PFF receiving grade. I think so. I'm out on that. Was not a fan. The Neighbors pick, I mean, look, I'm probably going to be higher on him than most people upcoming this year because they just look at the Giants as being a terrible landing spot. And I'm like, why? Why is that the case? You believe in Brian Daboll before when he became the Giants head coach. We've seen iterations with the offense. If the offensive line can stay healthy, it's run well. And if we believe that Neighbors is that guy, who is fighting him for targets? Nobody outside of Darren
but do you
Waller.
believe Daniel Jones is that guy? I guess that's the other question.
I mean, look, I just want targets. I want volume. If Daniel Jones can just be somewhat serviceable, give me league average quarterback play. And look, last year was bad. There's no denying that. But the year prior to that, he operated well. And there's nobody on that team that's going to demand targets. Outside of Darren Waller, nobody on that team demanded over a 16.9% target share last year. So even looking at, and if you add on top of this, Joey, the Giants had the 4th highest neutral rushing rate last season. No Saquon. You can try to run. I'm not telling you you're going to be able to. With this offensive line, these guys, they're going to have to throw the ball a certain amount. And I think they're going to throw the ball more than they did last year, just looking at how last year went, because you had Tommy DeVito under center, you had Tyrod Taylor, you couldn't throw the ball. I mean, I think we're going to see a little bit more passing volume, and if Neighbors is that guy, I think he's going to surprise people in terms of where they rank him in redraft rankings, and he's going to surpass that. I'm with Thor and Tyrone Tracy. I mean, he's going to compete for the RB2 role in this depth chart immediately. Eric Gray was nothing spectacular. 2.8 yards per carry, 1.53 yards to contact per attempt next year. So stash him on your taxi squads, especially, if you do have Devin Singletary or if you need the RB depth in fantasy.
All right, let's stay in the division here with the Philadelphia Eagles. Thor, they needed corner help. They got corner help. Quinyon Mitchell made it down to them. Cooper DeJean made it to them as well. So they snapped up those two guys. Then they took the edge rusher, Hunt. So what'd you make of how Howie did again in what seems like an annual festival? We all sit here and just kind of applaud Howie Roseman and the Eagles.
Sure is. Yeah, this is becoming a yearly thing. A+ for the Eagles again. This year, another guy filters down the board. Quinyon, 11th on my board. They get him at 22. Wow. Then Howie started he went John Wick on Friday. Just started trading, going up the board, down the board. Started going up the board to steal Cooper DeJean. Got aggressive in moving up there. 19th on my board. Howie gets him at 40. So 40 picks have been off the board. Howie has 2 of the top 3 cornerbacks, which, of course, that was their biggest need heading in. They had the aging cornerbacks. So now Howie's like, NFL, I have 2 of the best 3 cornerbacks in this draft. Then he just starts trading down, and picking up surplus value in every single trade. And then he starts picking up future picks. So he ends up coming out of this draft with 3 picks for next year, ends up tying the NFL record for trades made in a draft. He stops trading down for a second to take a breath and take my favorite edge sleeper in this class, a kid named Jalyx Hunt from Houston Christian, who was a safety a couple years ago, bulks up, this crazy athlete that I think there's something there. They're going to develop that kid, but early on he's going to be a pass rushing OLB. But like I said, I think there's something there. The stuff they did on day 3, for me, it was hit and miss overall, but they had picked up so many extra bullets there. You can hit and miss, because if you hit a couple times on those, you're cooking with gas there. And they, like I said, they picked up all these extra bullets for next year with all these extra picks. This draft was an A+.
Debro, your thoughts on the Eagles? Is it an A+ for you too?
It is an A+ for me. I thought, again, it's just Howie doing Howie things. If you look at this from a fantasy angle, though, it's pretty brutal for all the players that landed here, though. I mean, Will Shipley for the next 2 years, probably 3 years, is buried behind Saquon Barkley. So if you got Barkley in Dynasty, you want to, insulate your roster some, pick up Shipley in Dynasty rookie draft, stash him on your taxi squad. But outside of that, he's probably not going to have much value unless there's an injury. Same thing for my boy Johnny Wilson, man. Love him coming out, love his game. But to fall all the way down the board like he did to the 6th round, just in terms of draft capital, hurts. And unless he converts to tight end, like we've talked about and multiple people everywhere has talked about, unless he converts to tight end, where is the path for him to get volume? The Eagles just re-upped A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, so good luck with that. So unless he's going to move to tight end, and Dallas Goedert isn't a free agent until 2026. So where's the path for Johnny Wilson? So unfortunately, I dislike this highly for all of the guys that landed there skill-wise. But again, the Eagles overall, and as far as real football, they crushed this draft.
The 49ers were unable to move Ayuk or Deebo Samuel as of yet. Their asking price was sky high, and they still ended up drafting Ricky Pearsall to start their draft. Renardo Green, another piece there. So when you're starting to look out now at how the San Francisco 49ers did, Thor, this one was a little bit of a puzzling draft to me. What'd you make of it?
I ended up giving him plus. You have the ability to potentially make a bigger move with that Pearsall selection. Now, some people scratch their head at that. I love the Ricky Pearsall selection. They took him 31st. He was 32nd on my board. Ricky Pearsall is one of my favorite players in this class. Comp him to Adam Thielen, a comp I may have stolen from my colleague, Mr. Derek Brown there. Once he tossed that one out, I was like, that is the comp right there. I'd been struggling with that one, and it was like, that's the one. Pearsall, awesome hands, 86.8 PFF grade last year. Anything in his kitchen, he is catching, but beyond that, NFL fans are going to love the highlight reel catches. Dumbest highlight reel catches in college that you will see, and he has one of the greatest catches you will ever see in college, the catch against Charlotte. If people out there have not seen that, look that up on YouTube when we get off this show. The other pick that I wanted to shout out was Dominic Pooney at 86. I thought that was a steal. I had him as a top 50 prospect. He played left tackle last year, but I think he's headed inside to guard at the next level. I think he is going to be a really, really good one. But yeah, overall for the 49ers, a C+. Some of the picks later on were sort of hit and miss for me. But like I said, I really like the Pearsall pick. I think that they're going to do stuff with him. I thought it was interesting. CJ Stroud was on a different live stream during the draft. When Pearsall was announced, he was like, oh man, he was like, oh, we wanted Pearsall. Obviously, the Texans have three guys, but he started going nuts about how good Pearsall is. And he had watched Pearsall's tape. He's like, people don't get how good this guy is. And I was like, preach, King. Ricky Pearsall is a stud, and NFL fans are about to find out.
Yeah, Debro, I know you were high on Pearsall too, but one player does not make a draft grade. So what'd you give the 49ers at the end of the day?
I gave them a B. I think that, yes, we can scratch our heads on some of these picks later. I do like this as far as them also adding to their depth chart and covering positions of need. As far as Pearsall, I do think that I worry that he does go the JSN route, and whether it's because we don't know what's going to happen with Deebo and Ayuk. I mean, Ayuk is a free agent after this season, so 2025. Deebo is not a free agent until 2026. So if Ayuk stays in-house, Pearsall is going to have a hard time considering this team, and they love to run a lot of 12 and 21 personnel. Do they switch up, and now are they going to become an 11 personnel team? You invest a first-round pick, and you have all these guys still in-house. I think it's definitely a possibility of how this offense could change and evolve. I do like the pick of Isaac Guerendo, and I think that people need to be taking shots on him late in Dynasty rookie drafts, because if you look at this and just from a contract situation, Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason are both free agents after this season. And while Guerendo, you can talk about, okay, are his hips a little bit tight? And as far as changing directions, I think that he can work an outside zone. His numbers just on a per carry basis are extremely interesting. 14th in yards to contact per attempt last season, 18th in breakaway run rate, and 10th in yards per route run. So if you have CMC, or you're going to take a high upside shot on a guy that you could probably get in the third, fourth round of rookie drafts, stash him on your taxi squad. And if anything happens to Christian McCaffrey, it could be Isaac Guerendo carrying the mail for the San Francisco 49ers. Jacob Cowing, look, after we went to Mobile, I was really high on his game going into Mobile. Now, the thing that will be curious in his landing in San Francisco and the worries with Jacob Cowing is, okay, if a corner gets their hands on him, it's probably game over. But we know how much motion that Shanahan loves to use. If they put him in motion, get him free releases, he can beat defenses underneath. I'm not very high, again, talking about Pearsall, who got the first round equity. I'm not very high on Cowing, but if you want to take a shot on him, again, late rounds, fourth round of Dynasty rookie drafts, stash him on your taxi squad, I totally get it.
All right, the Seattle Seahawks draft. Some differing opinions here, Thor. But is this maybe one of the sleeper drafts that any team had when you step back from it and look at all the pieces that they've assembled here? Byron Murphy, Haynes, Knight, those are the first few picks that they made.
In my opinion, for sure. And this is one, we have the new coaching staff. This is one I think there was their fingerprints on it, and you get a lot tougher. The first one of Byron Murphy, in the trenches. Byron Murphy is a guy who grew on me a lot more. I think the flash plays is what people saw, with the three technique, undersized guy, 6'1.5", 297. And you see him getting into the backfield and the penetration. So thing I don't think people get about him is how strong his lower body is. And unlike a lot of guys like that, when he doesn't want to be moved out of his gap on the running concepts, you cannot move him. He's like a stump. Like I'm not moving. And so then he just holds the guard up, sticks his legs in the ground, and then the linebackers can flow behind him. So he has the 2-way game with that. Next pick, they steal, in my opinion, Christian Haynes, stud guard from UConn. He played on all these crappy UConn teams, and he was the one amazing player on it. It was like Jon Snow when the horses are descending on him with the sword, going up against some of these awesome teams. And he stuck it out there. It was really cool. Then he goes to the Senior Bowl, and it's like, how is this kid going to do against better competition? He was awesome. It was the answer to that question. The one other pick I wanted to shout out was early 4th round. They take AJ Barner from Michigan, a guy I was higher on than most during the process. The interesting thing, so AJ Barner was this awesome blocker. His PFF blocking grade last year, the run blocking, was 4 points higher than any other tight end in the entire FBS. Everyone gave the credit for the Blake Corum running last year to the offensive line. Blake Corum had the same yards before contact as he had after contact. But AJ Barner with the run blocking, they would do all kinds of stuff, moving him across the formation, putting him out in space, picking guys off in the second level. He was basically a third offensive tackle. He brings that to your team. He doesn't drop balls. He's not a great route runner. He doesn't have any speed, so you're not going to send him downfield. So like fantasy players might not be the most attracted to him. But again, the blocking he brings, and then he's a very, very good special teamer. And interestingly enough, the Seahawks' new special teams coordinator, Jay Harbaugh, the guy that was Michigan special teams coordinator last year on their national title team.
D-Bro, what'd you make of the Seahawks draft?
I'll give them a B+, and really this comes down to there's nothing to really chew on here, AJ Barner included, as far as fantasy-wise. Like, I don't have a high ceiling on him, but this is a great NFL-worthy draft, and I think that this helps us from a fantasy angle, that if you increase and improve in the trenches, because this Seattle team needed to do that. I mean, if you look at last year, 28th in pass blocking grade per PFF for their offensive line, 15th in run blocking grade. They took shots on the offensive line, and they had to do this. Like, Geno Smith was pressured at the 5th highest rate in the NFL last year. You can't operate an efficient offense regardless of who you have at skill positions if your quarterback is under duress as soon as he gets the ball in his hands. So looking at this draft, they got better in the trenches. Look, Thor just talked about AJ Barner, and he is a monster as far as a blocker. It's going to help them in pass pro. It's going to help them in the run game. So this might not be a sexy draft as far as fantasy angle goes on the surface, but this is absolutely a draft they needed to help improve all the fantasy assets in real life.
I don't think you would call the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a sexy draft this year, Thor, but perhaps you see things differently. What'd you make of what the Bucs did in 2024?
Well said. I gave it a C, and there was, again, like infrastructure and helping out some of these ancillary positions, maybe not for the fantasy guys, but, Graham Barton, for instance, first pick guy, stud collegiate tackle at the end there, but I think he is heading inside at the next level. But I thought that there was good value on that. Next pick, Chris Braswell, an edge guy that they picked right about where I had him. Tyke Smith going to be a nickel guy, but it was just, those kind of picks, just hitting it down the fairway with those kind of guys. The one that I wanted to shout out, Jalen McMillan, banging the table for him all process long. I kept saying he was better than Jalen Polk. I ranked him 93rd. The Bucs took him 92nd. Whenever Jalen McMillan was on the field and Jalen Polk, they were on the field together. Jalen McMillan was the clear wide receiver 2 on those Washington teams. So I think Jalen McMillan, he profiles as a guy who is going to start in the slot in the NFL for a very long time and is going to catch a metric ton of balls.
D-Bro, what'd you think of the Buccaneers draft when all is said and done?
Yeah, I was similar kind of concept of the way that I went with Seattle. I gave Seattle the B+. Tampa Bay, I'm giving the B- too. I thought this was a really solid draft. Maybe not so much high-end fantasy assets, but looking at this was really just bolstering their depth in a lot of places of need. We talked about this on the stream when it was happening, but Antoine Winfield might be gone. Chris Godwin might be gone. I think McMillan's going to be a slot wide receiver. I don't give him the highest ceiling, but I think that he can be a solid NFL player. And Bucky Irving, I'm not telling you that Bucky Irving's going to come into this depth chart and he is going to press immediately for volume off of Rachaad White's plate. But I think that Bucky Irving obviously feels a need because Chase Edmonds could not stay healthy. If you want to take shots on Irving just based off of the tackle breaking metrics, what he did on paper last year, I get that. But we also have to note, miserable RAS score last year. So I like this much more from an NFL perspective than I do from a fantasy angle.
All right, we've got one more to go here. The Washington Commanders, they took Jayden Daniels. I know you guys were very excited about that. Johnny Newton was the next selection there for them. It's a pretty strong draft here, I thought, for the Washington Commanders. I would personally give it an A, but Thor, what did the algorithm tell you?
Right with you, Joe. I give them an A as well. This was a smash for Adam Peters and crew. They needed it and they got it. Washington spent the third most draft equity in the NFL, and they come out of this draft by my numbers with the most talent that any team pulled out of the draft process. Jayden Daniels was the correct decision at number 2. Then they steal Johnny Newton at 36. He was number 22 on my board. I love Mike Sanderstill's game. I could wax poetic about that kid forever, but talk about a guy that sees things before they happen and gets the 4-step head start on them and gets going. That's how he overcomes his measurables. He was 37th on my board. They had him 50th. Ben Sennett. You want to hear my take on Ben Sennett? Go and watch any of our shows. I love that guy. He was 53rd on my board. Commanders took him 53rd. We call that a battleship. Brandon Coleman, I love that guy too, is another guy who's banging the table for. Speaking of banging the table, Luke McCaffrey. I couldn't shut up about that guy all process. Didn't understand why people had him lower. I had him 107th on my board. They took him 100th. I just adored what they were doing over and over and over again. It wasn't just the values in the slot. It wasn't just hitting their needs. There was also a cohesion and a plan with it. It was just all that different stuff. I just really, really like what they did. This is the type of class that turns the ship around of a franchise.
That is probably the most important piece here. Did you agree with that, Debro, that this is the kind of draft that takes this Commanders franchise has kind of been floundering for quite some time now and puts them on the right track now for the next 5 years?
Yes, that they crushed this entire draft. I mean, you want to talk about they are on the short list of teams that at every single turn just made master strokes as far as draft picks. And so I gave them an A+.
Oh, wow.
Looking at this class, I mean, again, Jayden Daniels for both Dynasty, you need to be, he's in the conversation for 101 in Superflex Dynasty rookie drafts. He is in that conversation. He is my QB 10 in redraft ranks just with the rushing equity and the fact that he is going to chuck the ball deep. There's going to be ceiling and there's a really, really high floor in both formats. Ben Sennett is somebody I really wanted to highlight here. I mean, Thor and I have loved him throughout the entire process. My tight end 2 entering the draft, my tight end 2 exiting the draft. I updated my Dynasty rookie rankings and as well as my overall rankings. People could be surprised out there because when they go to check those out, they're going to see he is my tight end 10 overall in Dynasty right now. And if you have a problem with that, you have not been staring or watching Ben Sennett's game, nor have you looked at his metrics for a tight end that was 9th in receiving grade, 9th in yards per route run last year, 4th in missed tackles amongst all tight ends, as well as going back to the man coverage targets and looking at that, 15th in yards per route run against all FBS tight ends with at least 10 man coverage targets. I will be reaching for him in Dynasty rookie drafts. I think he is a second-round pick. Where you want to draft him in the second round is totally up for debate, especially in tight end premium formats. He is going to go later than he should, and you need to scoop him up. I will draft him aggressively. So love that pick, and as well as Luke McCaffrey. Thor's talked about him all process. I love this kid. And I will say this, Joey. We could see Luke McCaffrey starting in 2 wide receiver sets possibly this year over Jahan Dotson. I'm not telling you it's going to happen week 1, but by the end of the season, I think it's definitely possible. Jahan Dotson, this regime did not draft him. And what does Jahan Dotson do? What has he done over the last 2 years to pay off on that first round equity? Nothing. Squat. Zilch. Nada. Curtis Samuel was beating him for targets last year. So I'm just out on Jahan Dotson, and I'm super in on Luke McCaffrey. Last year, 86th percentile versus zone coverage. And people say, well, he's just a slot-only guy. You need to wrap your head around this iteration, and right now in the NFL, almost every team out there runs zone on at least 60% of the defensive snaps. So I don't care that he wins versus zone and maybe he has problems getting pressed off the line. This kid is still growing into his game as a wide receiver, and we're only seeing him scratching the surface about what he can be. My comp, and this is not lazy because he's a former quarterback, but it is Jakobi Meyers as a player that hit the NFL and continually saw his game take it to another level the longer that he was in NFL rooms and with NFL coaching. Love Luke McCaffrey.
Yeah, Edelman was another convert guy, went to wide receiver and ended up being pretty good too. It does happen, folks. But some good grades here for the Washington Commanders. What do you think of the Commanders or any of these teams? Drop the comments below over here on our YouTube channel at Fantasy Pros. Don't forget to like this video, share, subscribe, ring the bell till it goes ding, and join us for all the NFL content because we're going to have a ton of it. And of course, join our Discord, fantasypros.com/chat. There's AMAs, there's all kinds of fun things going on there. There's special shows over there now too. Also, again, just a reminder, the Dynasty Draft Kit is live at fantasypros.com/dynasty. Go check it out today. It's free. It's fantastic. Just like these two guys here. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Thor and Debro, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.